Colcer podcast. How we feeling, man? How we doing?
Pretty good.
Yeah.
Thanks for having me over.
No, thank you for coming. I've been looking forward to this podcast for a while now because I've wanted to just hear your story. I haven't met you, but I feel like everywhere you look on Twitter, you're constantly seeing Tensor this, Tensor that, and so pumped to get to know you and learn more about your story. But dude, first off, thank you for coming by today.
Of course. I mean, it feels like we already met before because we just go back and forth on Twitter.
100%.
It's entirely different because it feels like everything is so small and tight knit because everyone kind of knows each other on Twitter. But of course, it's always different, like meeting someone in person.
And that's why I love going to all the IRL events, because it's like you see somebody at one of those and like all of a sudden you're like, I remember the first time I met King Fudd, he like came up to me and he just whispers in my ear, "What up, dude?" And I was like, "Oh my God, it's King Fudd!" And it was like, dude, I feel like I'm in a Twitter space, and now it's just right in real life. So, but man, for people who don't know who you are, can you give a 30-second intro to yourself?
Yeah, I'm Richard. On Twitter, I go by Richard. I'm one of the co-founders of Tensor. Me and Ilmoy started Tensor just about 2 years ago, back in February 2022. And we built this thing. For the longest time, it was just us two devs, one dream. And then of course now we're much bigger.
There we go. So walk me through, what were you doing before, like take me back before Tensor, before anything even like that, before even getting into crypto and NFTs and all of that. What were you doing with your life?
Yeah, so I just graduated university like right before COVID. Then I went down so I studied like computer science. So I'm like I guess like a software engineer by trade. I don't even know if people call by trade anymore if you're in like the software space. But went to school for CS, and then I flew down to New York to work at this like quantitative trading firm. Kind of like the people in crypto know about like Jump. They might have heard about like maybe Jane Street. I worked at a similar firm in New York City, but in TradFi. And so I was doing, models like quant models, AI models for predicting stock returns. So I was like really into the finance space for the longest time, just in TradFi. But then I had a bunch of trading friends, people who worked at like Jump, who worked at like Jane Street, and they were talking about crypto. Because crypto was a really hot thing at the time. Like this was like right before COVID, and then COVID happened. And then of course we knew what happened with like prices. It just started going up. And people were talking about like, oh, there's this like new blockchain called Solana. And it's very different from Ethereum. I heard about Ethereum back in 2017 when all that craziness was happening. But people were saying that Solana is so much better than Ethereum when it comes to the speed and the cost of it. And it was very appealing to traders because it was almost like pitched, and I think Anatoly still pitches this. This is still the case, and how Anatoly pitches this, but it's meant to be like the NASDAQ of the world. It's meant to like ideally replace NASDAQ as a permissionless state machine where anyone can interact with it. You're not like competing with the HFT guys. Everyone's sort of like on equal playing fields, and you can trade anything on this chain. And so that's what got me into like Solana. And afterwards, I was working at this trading firm for about 2.5 years, and I just got the itch to want to do a startup because I always had this like entrepreneurial mindset back in like university. Our university was like very entrepreneurial focused, and so I wanted to do like a startup. Basically right around like when COVID, everyone's still working from home. I just had the itch to do a startup, so I just went on Y Combinator. They have like this co-founder matching portal, and that's where I found Ilmoy.
Wow, that's how you guys met? That's wild. I thought you were going to tell me that you guys had known each other since you were 10 and yada yada. So you guys met through a Y Combinator like matching profile thing?
Tinder for co-founders.
That's amazing. Yeah, so tell me more about that.
Yeah, so Y Combinator, it's like the biggest, it's the most successful accelerator in the world for startups, mainly in Web 2. And they have this online startup school where people can basically like sign up for free. You put up your profile, almost like Tinder. You don't put like photos of yourself. I mean, you could if you want, but you put up like a description of like what you're interested in, what you're looking for, what kind of startups you want to do. And that's how you like find other co-founders who have similar interests and, focus points. And I was going through this Y Combinator co-founding matching portal, trying to look for like someone that I could like vibe with someone who is one, deeply technical, and had like a bunch of in coding, like you would put up like your work on GitHub. It's kind of like a portfolio page for yourself. But of course, you put anything on GitHub. So you could put like open source projects that you've worked on. You could put like, hackathon projects that you worked on. And so I found Ilmoy's profile on YC Startup School, or this co-founding matching portal. And he had a bunch of like Solana projects that was open source on GitHub that I could like go through. And that's when I like knew that, okay, I got to chat to this guy. I got to like pick his brain, see what's up in Solana, see what's up in like Web3. And yeah, I guess the rest is history. Just started chatting, talking about like how Solana is like really cool, really fast. And he just red pilled me into it.
That's very cool. That's very cool. So did you buy any like Solana NFTs at that point, or like when you were first talking to some of your friends who were working for Jump and a few other places, and they started talking to you about Solana, did you buy any NFTs, or when did you have like what was your first NFT you bought?
I think the first one I bought, it was some random NFT that I just saw. At the time, it was Magic Eden, Solanart, and maybe Hyperspace. I just bought the first thing I saw in like the top 10. I don't even know if they had a leaderboard, but like the first thing I saw, and I saw like the price change, like jumped a bunch. I aped into that, obviously lost all my money. It was my first like experience of just, getting hit in the face by like, getting punched in the face. I think the first legit NFT that I bought was a DeGods.
Oh, there we go.
And it was one of the Ilmoy, he sort of like told me, hey, I know a bunch of guys in the space who are good builders who basically bought a DeGods. It's, run by this, I don't think Frank was doxxed at the time, but he had a very big personality on Twitter. And that's kind of like what drew me in, because I knew that he knew how to talk his game. He wasn't someone who was kind of like trying to figure things out for the first time and didn't really know what he was doing on Twitter. But he had a lot of like energy and he could grab attention like no other people in the space. And I just said, okay, why not? I'll buy into it. Join the other builders in the space. Rep a DeGod on my Twitter profile.
There we go. Yeah. Okay, so just for a quick spicy moment, then we'll just, because I know people are going to run with this clip. Do you want to see DeGods come back to Solana?
I do. I think what's nice about crypto is, yes, like people have a lot of like preconceptions of like Frank leaving when Solana was at the bottom. But also like as a founder, you have to make like very tough decisions on like a very, very little amount of information. And I think at the time he was stuck between a rock and a hard place where he was like, okay, I'm not sure if Solana is gonna make it. Do I move to Ethereum? Do I move to Polygon, for example, with Utes, and hopefully keep the project going, or I die like tomorrow? And I think it wasn't a clear decision, right? Yes, of course, in hindsight, it's obvious that Solana clearly had a ton more to it, and there was a lot of excitement in the community still for like, buying into the next NFT projects, and people were still building, like we were still building, a lot of DeFi projects were still building, V2s, V3s. But I think for him, like he's a founder, it was do or die for him. He had to make a decision of like, do I, continue going to a different chain and hopefully get more capital for my project so I can continue paying my employees and, contractors, or do I ride it out on Solana? And I don't think it was a clear decision. I don't think it was a clear decision to anyone to stay on Solana or leave. So I don't blame him, and I don't blame him at all. Yeah. I think a lot of people will disagree with that, and I think that's fine because in this space, like, people can disagree. But I don't think it's a clear-cut decision, and I don't think anyone could have, like, in hindsight, made the right decision.
Yeah, I mean, the other thing is I try to always keep in mind is I'm like, this NFT space is like almost 3 years old, right? Like we're so young in this whole space, and so it's like there's so many things that we're still trying to figure out, and we're even seeing it with like pro sports leagues that have been around for 50 years or 100 years that still make massive changes, right? And sometimes they work and sometimes they don't. The PGA, the Golf Association, I don't know if you're familiar, but the PGA has been dealing with a lot in the last like year or so with Saudi Arabia and everything like that. And so they've tried some different things. Some things have worked, some things haven't. But again, that's a league that's been around for a really long time that's still making drastic changes, right? Yep. And so I look at the NFT space and I'm like, okay, it's been around for such a short period of time. And so how do we know exactly what we need to do? You have to try certain things. Sometimes they're going to work. Sometimes they're going to blow up in your face. But like, the worst thing that you can do is do nothing, you know? And it's like, at a time that we're in, you have to adjust, and you have to adjust quickly. And sometimes you're going to make the right adjustment, and sometimes you're not. But like, again, I don't think we can penalize anybody for trying to survive, because again, this is a space where there is no guarantee that like NFTs are going to be a thing 10 years from now. We all want them to be. I want them to be. You want them to be. We're all working towards that. But there is no guarantee, because this space is still so young. So we have to do what we have to do to fight to survive, right? And so, yeah, with that, tough decisions are going to be made. Some people are going to love those decisions. Some people are going to hate those decisions. You know, it's always going to stay spicy on the timeline. It's going to keep things interesting. So.
I mean, I respect him, right? Like, he's a founder like us. We had to make tough decisions. Sometimes they turned out to be incorrect. For Tensor, most of our decisions that we made in tough situations turned out to be correct, and we're grateful for it. Like, us doubling down on Solana, that turned out actually to be correct, right? Like, we saw that there was still a lot of excitement in the space. People were still sticking around, and that turned out for us. But it could very well, like in some alternate universe, that could have very well turned out to be really bad for us. And we might have had to like actually can the entire company and just like go back to our day jobs. And like, you know, for me, I might have to like leave Web3 and just like, you know, go back to, you know, working in TradFi, which is like less fun, less exciting for me.
Yeah. So, okay, so I want to get back into Tensor. So when you first connected with Ilmoy on this Y Combinator portal, you know, how did, I guess, like the idea for Tensor start to formulate? Was there like a problem in the space that you guys were trying to solve with your marketplace? Or I guess like, how did it go from like idea to launch? Walk me through that timeline.
Yep. So we initially started off with a completely different idea. It was still related to NFTs. But we kind of had like a more pie in the sky idea, where we saw that NFTs were taking off. There's obviously existing marketplaces. They were decent enough. But what we thought might have happened earlier was that NFT DeFi was going to take off as well. We thought that stuff like lending, stuff like NFT perps, exotic things that you see in like DeFi already, like options. I don't even know what else there is in DeFi now, but options, perps, lending protocols, all of that stuff was also going to take off for NFTs. And so we wanted to build something that was very fundamental to all of these DeFi primitives, and that was the Oracle. So we started off by creating an NFT Oracle that would give any protocol a very consistent, reliable price in pricing data for any NFT collection. And we actually started off on both Ethereum and Solana, and we had this pricing Oracle for basically the top 20 collections on each chain. We had a bunch of protocols that initially came to us and said, hey, you know, we desperately need this, build this for us, and we'll pay you for it. But of course, as with like most products and most startups, you build the thing, you go back to them, and, you know, it's a tough sell. They beat around the bush a bit, you know, they don't necessarily like pay you immediately. We had basically just one protocol, which was Fract at the time, that was actually paying us monthly to use this Oracle. And so we basically had to make the decision, okay, this market is probably not big enough for us now. We're still bullish on NFTs. We're still bullish on NFT DeFi. What can we do that has much more demand now, so that we can continue building a platform, getting more users, so that we can sort of like get to that end state of like NFT DeFi like flourishing, kind of like how DeFi already flourished. And so that's when we like looked around. We saw that marketplaces were a big thing, but at the time, you know, we were trading NFTs, we were trading OKBears, which is like the hottest mint ever. And I remember vividly the worst experience that I've had was going on the existing marketplace at the time and trying to like sweep OKBears right after mint. I could not get a single transaction through. Everything kept failing. All the listings, you know, and the floor listings were all stale, and the data just wasn't coming in fast enough. And that was kind of like the impetus moment of us deciding, hey, maybe there is a 10x improvement that we can bring to NFT marketplaces, where you're no longer stuck with like stale listings. You're no longer stuck not being able to sweep a hot new collection that mints. And it'll be catered towards the trader type, right? Someone who wants to get in quickly as soon as possible into OKBears, because I know that the price is probably going to go up 2-3x, and get out as quickly as possible. And coming from TradFi, coming from like trading maybe like fungible tokens on sexes, that experience is completely different from what was available at the time for NFTs. There wasn't real-time data. There wasn't like a live feed. There wasn't like an order book view, which for the average like DeFi or coin trader, that's like especially important, but that was not existent in the NFT space. And we knew that like those few things, building like a terminal-like experience for NFTs could be a very big platform that we could essentially seize the moment for and get a lot of users to use it. And so we just ran with that. So we built the pro trading marketplace for NFTs. Initially it was an aggregator, and then of course it became a marketplace later on. And yeah, I guess the rest is history.
There we go. And so once you guys launched, when did you start to see, like, I guess, did you start to see volume right away, or when did the volume start to come in? Because at the current standpoint that we're at, which is whatever today is, January 3rd, 2024, you guys are currently the #1 marketplace in Solana in terms of volume. And so when did you start to see volume, going from some of the other marketplaces to Tensor, and why do you think that was that you started to see all that volume coming in?
To be honest, I think for the longest time we were quite, I want to say like disappointed, and that like volume didn't pick up at all when we launched, right? So we went public at around, I want to say July 2022. That was after like a 1-month private beta period where we had like about 50 to 100 people that we chatted with directly in DMs on like Twitter, Telegram. They were using the product every single day, but more so as an aggregator and a trading tool than an actual marketplace. So when we launched publicly in July 2022, we had basically 0% volume for, 5-6 months. It wasn't until, I want to say, February 2023 when there was a lot of momentum coming in from Blur having dropped their token, and a lot of people feeling that FOMO effect of missing out on Blur on Ethereum, and how they basically rewarded a bunch of the early users with a large supply of the Blur token. A lot of people felt, I think, the FOMO of missing out on that and decided to look towards Solana, which is also picking up a lot more momentum when it comes to NFTs at the time. And so they basically like saw Tensor as the next Blur, which admittedly, we were not necessarily playing into that, but we had a lot of similar characteristics where we were targeting the pro trader. We had this thesis that the bulk majority of volume is done by the top 10%. So like 80% of the volume is done by the top 10% of traders. And if we can build the best product for the top 10% of traders, then we could eventually get 80% of the volume. In hindsight, that, obviously turned out to work well. We're at 70% volume right now, and we have maybe 50% of users. And so our users tend to do dramatically more volume than the average NFT trader. But that was sort of like what people pattern matched on. And we saw a lot of momentum coming in from Blur's airdrop. I think now it's changed a lot more. Like when Blur dropped their token and their season 1 and 2 airdrop, we got to about 25-30% market share, and then it kind of like plateaued afterwards for quite some time. And it wasn't until we started introducing more fun NFT trading primitives, we added like features that were only possible on Solana. Like AMM orders was a massive thing initially when SudoSwap launched on Ethereum. Basically, for those who don't know, AMM orders lets you buy and sell NFTs, kind of like on Uniswap or on Orca for like regular tokens. Lets you buy and sell NFTs simultaneously without you actually having to click buttons. So it does it automatically for you. That's kind of faded out on Ethereum, but it actually took off on Solana. And a lot of people was using Tensor to create these AMM orders to essentially like buy and sell NFTs without ever having to press another button. And that was really cool because we saw a lot of like market share gain from just having an AMM feature on our marketplace. I think like going from 25-30% market share to where we're at currently, it was one, doubling down on Solana when maybe other marketplaces or other platforms in general were sort of like looking elsewhere, digging into the community, giving away a ton of, when Mad Lads dropped, we had this massive giveaway where we just gave like, I think over 8,000 SOL of free Mad Lads just from like the fees that we collected. We gave all of that away in terms of like a Mad Lads raffle program. And I think the community just dig that, right? I think people just loved our ethos and loved how we operated as a marketplace.
100%. So you talk about doubling down on Solana. Obviously when FTX happened, there was a lot of worry amongst pretty much everybody of like, hey, we just dropped from, at our peak, $250 for Solana down to $8. Volume has slowed down drastically on NFTs. You're seeing less people active on Twitter. It was a worrisome time period, especially, as a content creator in the space. Yep. I was like, holy shit, we need some good news coming in because this is tough to talk about currently. Was there worry on your end of like, are we going to see volume pick up on NFTs and how long is that going to take? Because obviously as a marketplace, you're making money off transactions and things like that. But if we're not seeing a lot of volume coming in, and also there's, different marketplaces competing for that same volume, it's going to be difficult to survive at that point. So was there, because when you talk about doubling down on Solana, obviously the elephant in the room is that, Magic Eden then added Polygon, they added Ethereum, they added Bitcoin. And so while you guys were doubling down on Solana, they were kind of expanding the pie. Was there thought of doing that? Or I guess like, is there a reason why you guys haven't added other blockchains to Tensor? And are you guys planning on that? Let's, kind of walk me through, I guess, like what was the thought process at that time when FTX happens and, there's kind of some more worry in the space than probably we've ever seen before.
Yep. I would say right when Solana hit $8, we actually, like, obviously, like, we felt like crap because we both personally had a bunch of Solana, and seeing it go from, I think it was like $40 at the time down to $8, like within like a 2-hour period, that was insane because like that had probably never happened before for Solana specifically. But I would say like when it comes to the amount of activity that was still going on with NFTs, we were actually kind of bullish. Because people were still trading NFTs. People were like scooping up DGODs. I think it was at like 200 SOL at the time, dropped to like 60 SOL. And like people were still like buying up DGODs, buying up SMBs, buying up, all the other collections on Solana. And the number of like active wallets was at its all-time high. And in like SOL denominated terms, which of course isn't like one-to-one, apples to apples, but it was the highest that it's been since the beginning of the bull market. And that's because like Solana was $8, but of course like denominated in SOL was a lot of volume. And so that actually like gave us a bit of conviction to continue building on Solana. But I would be lying to you if I said we didn't consider going to a different chain. I think many times Ilmo and I had the conversation, especially after like chatting with a bunch of investors and VCs at the time, because we were trying to do a seed round. They basically told us, hey, or basically like mentioned like, hey, you guys are on Solana, you've built this great product, you have a lot of like daily active users. Have you ever considered just going to Ethereum where the pie is much bigger, there's a lot more dollar size, there's a lot more dollars being like traded back and forth at the time. And like we seriously considered like, okay, maybe we should try to find a way to get into Ethereum, try to find a way to get into some of the other chains. I think what made us decide not to ultimately go down that path is we felt that all of the really good builders, so not like the long tail of like people who were on Solana at the time, was not really like deep into it and were really more like tourists, but all the deep DeFi builders, infrastructure builders like Mert, bunch of other people that we know personally, they were all continuing to build the V2, V3s of their protocols. They were coming out with new API endpoints, new SDKs. They were building because they still saw users coming through, and we still saw the same thing on our platform. Like our daily active user counts were the highest it had ever been, even though it was, everything went to, 10% of what it was initially. And we just felt like, okay, we got to stick this out a couple more months. We have this great product. People love to use it. They come back every single day. And if we don't push through it and maybe, see a bit of light at the end of the tunnel before we decide to pivot to a different chain, then it would be a complete, waste, and we'll probably regret it. And so we decided to double down on Solana. Turned out to be the correct decision. We saw a lot more activity come back a couple months after FTX. There was this sort of like lull period, probably in July of 2023, where the volumes really hit the bottom. And I think at that time we had a bit more market share, and so like our growth relative to like in absolute terms wasn't necessarily going up anymore. That's when we also like sort of like considered like, okay, NFT volumes, the market isn't really growing, our market share isn't really growing at the time. Is there something else that we can do here on Solana? I think that's when we sort of like look towards compressed NFTs. And that's when we made that big push of becoming the first marketplace to support compressed NFTs, and also the first collection to do a 10K PFP drop on the new compressed NFT standard. That's when like things started to pick up again. We were trying to push forward this new technology that is again only possible on Solana. And I think that's like when we personally got a lot more excited and wanted to continue pushing on Solana, because we knew that, okay, if compressed NFTs are going to take off and we become the first one and the only ones, maybe not the only ones, but like the first ones to push on it and become the dominant player for compressed NFTs, then this could become a really big business.
100%. So when you talk about it now, like obviously now we're in a much better place. We're seeing a lot more volume coming into NFTs. Solana's doing really well. We're starting to see, the opposite effect of that time period where there were people going from Solana to Ethereum. Now we're seeing people from Ethereum coming over to Solana, kind of seeing that the tech is pretty cool over here, which I've always kind of thought, at some point everything's going to be pretty multi-chain, right? Because like, each chain kind of has its different benefits and things like that. And I think there's going to be a lot of people that are, Bitcoin maxis that are only going to be interested in ordinals. I think there's going to be ETH maxis that are only interested in ETH NFTs. And I think there's going to be Solana people who really love Solana and they're going to stick with Solana. But then I think there's going to be always a lot of people that are like, well, hey, I like all of them, and that's kind of been my ethos. Like I've been DCAing into Bitcoin, Ethereum, and Solana for the last probably 2 years. And that's just been something that I've done on a regular basis because I think each chain brings different benefits. So do you think there will be a time period where Tensor supports NFTs from all the different chains, or is it something where right now you guys are just locked in on Solana and if it happens down the road, it happens down the road?
I think in this world, never say never. I think there is a world where we maybe support Bitcoin, Ethereum, any other chain, maybe like an Aptos or a Sui. I would say for the next year, at least for all of 2024, we're laser focused on Solana. I think there is so much interesting things that have been unexplored in the NFT space, specifically going back to the whole idea of like NFTX DeFi. Our original thesis for why like this space was interesting to us personally was creating these like new NFT meets DeFi primitives. Like you can imagine like perps is like one example of a really cool primitive that we could take from DeFi and apply it to NFTs. We're not doing perps, but you can imagine there are like more interesting ways to bring financial primitives to NFTs that no one has really done well enough, right? Beyond just like trading back and forth and maybe lending and borrowing, there has been no NFT DeFi primitive that has really taken off. And I think that's like a huge missed opportunity for all of these other, NFT protocols or marketplaces that we want to be the first ones to prove out on Solana. I think that alone there's so much work, there's so much experimentation, iteration that can go into it that I think we'll be on Solana and doing a lot of cool things for the next year.
How much do you pay attention to what people are doing on other chains to kind of see what you can implement in Solana? And I guess like my example of that would be Free Lunch Capital put out Flooring Protocol over the last, however many months ago he put that out. And I think that platform is very, very cool. I'm always super bullish on Free Lunch and everything he's building over there. How much do you pay attention to like what he's doing with that? And do you think there's aspects of that you could then bring over to Solana and Tensor and kind of take some of the different things that some of the different chains are doing and bring that to Solana?
I would say we chatted with Free Lunch. We like him a lot. What he's doing with flooring is really cool. I think it's like the first time that fractionalized NFTs have really like found a better product market fit. I don't know if it's like clear and obvious product market fit yet, but like it's definitely gotten a lot of traction. I wouldn't say we're like looking at other chains to copy and and paste onto Solana and just do it like under the Tensor brand. I would say we're looking at other chains and seeing like what ideas are being tried, what seems to be working, and then digging into the root cause of why people are using this product. So sort of working from the very bottom, like from first principles, and thinking about, okay, are people using Flooring Protocol because it's just like cheaper to get exposure to DeGods because you're only buying like one fraction of a DeGods? Or are there other like primitives, like maybe you could short it, maybe you can compose it with like Uniswap, compose it with other DeFi protocols because everything is a token, and then you can do more complicated things with it. for us, we look at that and like try to figure out why are users using flooring protocol versus Blur or OpenSea, and is that something that we can cater to on Solana and maybe even do it a bit better? And I think that's our thesis, or that's been our modus operandus, is always like looking at what other people have tried and seeing if we can do it better in order to like better fit the underlying need that users are like asking for, right?
Yeah, no, that makes sense. So you talked about, at the beginning, it's, there's always been this whole thing of Richard and Elmoy, and they're just two devs behind computers, and that's how they built out Tensor. But you've talked about how you guys have expanded the team from here. Can you talk about what sort of roles you guys have added to the team, what sort of roles you're expecting to add to the team this upcoming year, and kind of how you guys have gone about expanding the team behind Tensor?
I would say we have been probably much more deliberate than most startups when it comes to expanding our team. And I think that goes back to sort of the way we started initially, and it was just us two, and then our first hire was actually someone from our community. I don't know if you know him, but he goes by like Sting on Twitter. He basically leads trading, working with market makers, working with collections to essentially better integrate with Tensor with whatever they're doing, and he has been phenomenal, right? Like he's a true NFT degen. Of course, he does like tokens as well, but he is very deep into the Solana NFT ecosystem and, formerly like into other NFT ecosystems. So he has a lot of insight that he's bringing from like Ethereum. He's bringing from, I think he was on like Polygon for a bit, and he's bringing all of that into the team and into our sort of our perspectives. And I think that's like the type of people we want to hire are people who are passionate about the space, who like Solana NFTs a lot, who like the idea that you don't have to pay $50 to do a transaction like you would on Ethereum just for gas. That just goes to like the validators and not like into your own profits if you're a trader. We like working with people who are deep in the space. So right now we've essentially expanded to 10 full-time contributors. I would say, so there's two of us, Ilmoy and me are the co-founders. We have 4 full-time engineers, and they're also, all of them are like in the NFT space or in Solana deeply. And then we have Shake, who does BD with our collection. He's a legend.
Love Shake.
He's awesome. Sting, and then Speaks, who does our marketing.
There we go.
And Arc, who is sort of our operations. He also does a lot of modding in our Discord and Telegram.
There we go. What kind of roles do you think you'll expand to with this year? Any I guess for people who are looking to potentially work for Tensor, are there certain roles that you guys would be looking to fill this year?
We're always hiring engineers. Like that is the one thing that we can never get enough of, is more engineers who are, you don't have to be super deep into Solana, but you have to be interested and passionate about it, and NFTs as well. But you have to be a really great engineer, right? We're not looking for the average, not to trash on them, but like the average like FANG engineer who's in the space because maybe there's a ton of money. We want someone who is passionate about their craft of coding and likes Web3 at the same time, likes NFTs, and wants to work on a really tight ship where everyone is shipping like a 10x engineer. In addition to engineers, we're also looking for a head of ops right now. So someone who can like basically deal with all of our back office stuff, because we have a lot of that. We have like, hiring papers, dealing with like legal things, managing our mods on Discord, figuring out like, where's our next office space so that everyone who's currently working out of Toronto right now actually has like desks that they can work at. A long tail of things on the operations side that we need someone to just like run at it. And I think we're still looking for a DevRel advocate as well. So someone who can actually like reach out to developers and get them interested in building on top of our protocols.
There we go. So now talk to me about the Tensorians. So you guys launched Tensorians over the summer, if I'm correct on the timeline. What was kind of the logic behind that, and what was the thought process behind launching a 10K collection?
Yep. So I think maybe taking a step back, I think what we wanted to initially do with Tensorians was almost create this new meta of NFTs. And I think the prime example that we were looking towards was Mad Lads and how they launched their collection. In fact, I think Mad Lads was probably one of the most successful, if not the most successful NFT launch on Solana to date. And what was very appealing about what they did was they weren't doing a mint just for the sake of doing an NFT mint, right? They did a mint to create 10,000 Mad Lads NFTs to give to their most loyal and most their power users, people who were in the backpack beta, who had like basically got an invite code early on, who invited a ton of other friends to use backpack, and they basically gave everyone a whitelist to mint Mad Lads, right? Of course, like it was minted for 6.9 Sol, and then went up to like 50 Sol like right off the bat because there's so much demand. And I think this trend of like platforms and products launching NFT collections, we're starting to see it happen more and more. And it's super powerful because it's essentially one of the most powerful, if not the most powerful, user acquisition tools we've seen to date in crypto. So what you do is, for us, we wanted to essentially reward all of our loyal users since the very beginning, since season 1 of Tensor Points. And we wanted to give them something tangible to rep, to show that they're like, one of the OG Tensor users. They've been around since day one, and they want to show everyone else that they're a loyal Tensor user. And that is, so the Tensorian Collection was basically our way to create this tangible community where people can say they're a Tensorian, they can show off, and maybe they get early access to a bunch of features that we're launching. Or, right now we're doing a bunch of launches with collections on our launchpad. They get early access, first access to all the whitelists and pre-sales that we're doing with these collections. That's like something that I think is very hard to find in Web 2 because you don't have the concept of like ownership in the digital space in Web 2, but you do have that in Web 3. And NFTs are almost like the perfect vehicle for consumer ownership that exists, right? Like a fungible token is very different in that, like, okay, it's a ticker, and then there might be a JPEG, like it might be like a dog or a Shiba Inu, but that's it, right? It's not fun. There's not like a lot of like personality to it. There's only like one thing that you can do with it, which is like, well, two things, which is like buy and sell. But for NFTs, like it's so multifaceted and you can do so much with it. It's like the perfect thing for consumers to latch onto. You can like, for example, you can stake it. You can use it as token gating to enter like exclusive events, exclusive Discord chats, exclusive parties at like Breakpoint, which is what we did with like Claynosaurs. We had like this exclusive party with Tensorians. You can't really do that well with like a token, but you can do that really well with an NFT.
Was there worry of like, obviously you guys have a lot on your plate. You're running a marketplace. You're actively trying to add more features to it. You're trying to bring more volume to it. Was there worry of like, okay, now we're adding on this 10K PFP collection, and now we're going to constantly be asked about the floor price, and we're going to be asked about this, we're going to be asked, when this, when that. Was there thought of like, are we adding, are we adding more problem than like the benefit of, yes, you have all these loyal people. If they have a Tensorian, most likely they're going to be using Tensor, which is a great benefit, but like those people are also going to have more expectations from you guys now. Was there worry that it was I guess less more hassle than it was worth? Or I mean, I guess like what made you guys go, okay, you know what, fuck it, we got to just go for it?
For those who have never ran an NFT project, it is absolutely a double-edged sword. Like it's not like sunshine and rainbows where if you launch an NFT collection and, maybe people initially like it and people continue liking it, that's never the case. There are these wild swings, like very, very high highs, but also very low lows that you as a project, you as founders, you as contributors to this project just have to deal with and have like the mental fortitude to just work through it. And we went through this early on, and we kind of like predicted that this would happen because we just know based on like working with like other collections, because we're a marketplace, that they've gone through the same struggles and the same highs and lows. We kind of like expected that it was going to be a double-edged sword where a lot of people are going to get really excited early on about the project. They'll have really high expectations, almost like unrealistic expectations about Tensorians. And of course, we can never meet them, right? Like, I don't have a specific example, but like they might think like, oh, if I buy the Tensorians, or if I like join the Tensorians, every single opportunity, whitelists, pre-sales, all that stuff would just come to me. But obviously, there's practical limitations, and we can't provide every single Tensorian with a whitelist, every single Tensorian with a presale. I think after the initial cycle, I guess the hype of Tensorians, obviously a lot of like the short-term thinkers washed out, which was great, because then now you have a bunch of long-term believers of Tensor the product, of the team, of our philosophy and what we stand for, which is like we want to push the boundaries of Solana NFTs as far as we can. If you don't necessarily, if that's not something that you care about, then maybe this collection isn't for you. And those people naturally like left, right? But for those who did believe in that vision, who did believe in us as a hardcore team who's doing interesting things on Solana with the NFT standards, with NFT primitives, they stuck around. And of course, they've been with us since day one, and they're obviously feeling very grateful and very, very elated because of, Solana has been doing well, and there's a lot of attention coming back into Solana NFTs and Tensorians.
There we go. No, that makes perfect sense. So one of the questions that somebody asked me to ask you is, are there plans? Right now we're seeing kind of the meme coin going crazy on Solana. Are there plans at any point in time for people to be able to buy NFTs with, random SPL tokens? Is there any thought of that? Is there any plans for anything like that? And then I guess we'll get into some token talk for a quick second after that. But is there any plans for people to be able to buy NFTs with other SPL tokens?
There are plans. Obviously, the Bonk team has approached us, and we're trying to get that integration live. I think it makes a lot of sense, right? I think part of the friction of Web3, at least for people new to the space and coming into the space for the first time, where, on eBay or like your traditional Web2 platform, you can kind of like buy with like a credit card. And even if you're like, if you have like a UK credit card, or if you have like a Canadian credit card that only like essentially transacts in like Canadian dollars or like British pounds, you can still buy something on an American website, right? And that's a seamless experience. The credit card companies or the payment processors will automatically convert your currencies without you even having to think about it. And I think that's the experience we also want on Tensor. And so we're working on an integration right now to enable like all the SPL tokens to be able to buy with them on Tensor. I think there's a bit of like I guess maybe UX questions that we have to think about through internally. Like, let's say you put up a bid in a different SPL token and someone sells into that bid. Is the person selling into that bid going to receive that original token, or will you automatically swap it for, let's say, Sol? Or maybe like if the person is by default thinking in terms of USDC, does it make sense to swap it into USDC for that particular user? So there are like some like UX things that we have to think through just to make sure that the experience is like, feels awesome, feels like Web 2. But it's going to happen. It's going to happen in Tensor.
There we go. I'm excited. Yeah. So what are your thoughts overall just on this meme coin craziness going on right now? Because it seems like every day there's a new coin going crazy. There's people, making videos with, 2001 Honda Civic. We got people doing, dogs with hats all over the place. We're seeing all kinds of craziness all over the timeline. What are your thoughts on all of that? And are you degenning into meme coins, or what are your thoughts?
I am definitely degenning into meme coins right now. Obviously always support the OG Bonk, the Bonk coin, because they basically brought Solana back to life. They launched right at the bottom. I think meme coins are super interesting because there's nothing like it in Web 2. You can't speculate, you can't commiserate with memes and have like this financial incentive in Web 2. So I know we were talking earlier about like some of these trends that took off in like Web 2 social media, like planking, for example, was so ridiculous, but everyone was doing it and everyone wanted to like do it and like show that, okay, we're in this movement of like planking and a bunch of like random stuff. But it's much harder to participate in that world because you have to like have a social media following, and there's not like the fun of like some like financial upside. Whereas meme coins is exactly that. It's taking these cultural moments in time, like dog coins. So like Doge obviously like had Elon supporting it all throughout that bull market, and of course it went to insane prices. I think that's exciting for a lot of people because it's like it's a big FU to like the traditional system where people are making a ton of money off like a stupid dog coin, and it's kind of saying like, okay, we don't need to play by the rules of this like but by the the system that has been around since the traditional financial system that has been around since like the early 1800s 1900s. We can make a ton of money off dog coins, and you can't stop us from doing that. And that's really powerful. It's frankly like the system has gotten so bad where it's very difficult for someone who is not working in a high paying job, like a high paying industry like STEM or finance, to really achieve the American dream. And crypto is almost like a new way for people to achieve that American dream. And I think Memecoins is the biggest FU to the system.
Yeah, 100%. I mean, it is very fun to speculate on, and I think it just brings a lot of excitement, gives people something to talk about on the timeline and things like that. And and especially at a time, I think ETH meme coins really got all of this kind of started back in it was probably like March, and we saw Pepe and a few of these others that started to really go off, and Mog and a bunch of other coins, and you started to see a lot of excitement at a time when there wasn't much to be excited about in the NFT space. So I think it kind of helps kind of bridge that gap for people, gives them something that does have a gigantic upside, also has a gigantic downside too, but it gives people something fun to kind of speculate on. I think the names of the coins are always fun to look at too. But so obviously we've got technically this month is Jupuary. I think I'm pronouncing it the right way, and everybody's talking about that, and so naturally people are then going to speculate on other protocols and other platforms and things like that dropping tokens. Is there anything you can legally say about Tensor? Any plans you guys have for a token? Is there anything you can add to that?
No comment.
I knew that.
Our lawyers are telling us no comment.
I knew that's what the answer was going to be. Guys, I tried. Okay, listen, I had that was probably got 50 messages from people just saying, "Hey, can you ask them about a token?" Yeah, listen, I tried. So then I want to get into launchpads, because launchpads is always an interesting subject, because every launchpad in the history of NFTs has launched a project and somewhat promoted it that is basically hard rugged, right? And it's really, really difficult, in my opinion, to stop that from happening, because there's only so much that a launchpad can do. There's only so much they can do in terms of holding back funds from a team from a certain period of time and things like that. There's only so much you can do from a doxing standpoint. Some people will dox and still rug. So what are your thoughts on a launchpad? What are your thoughts on how to kind of prevent bad projects from launching? And just overall, what are your thoughts on all of that?
Yeah, so it's interesting you asked that, because I think Tensor, people don't normally think of us as having a launchpad. We do actually have a launchpad, but the reason why most people don't think that we have a launchpad is because we've been very selective for which projects we launch, and I think we'll be very selective going forward for which projects that we decide to work with. I think what we've seen with maybe previous launchpads is that we're not in the game of like trying to generate as much revenue off the launchpad side. Like that's just not the way that we operate. We want to work with people who are in it for the long term and doing something that is interesting. So I'll give you an example. The most recent project that we launched was Flash Trade, and they're these basically like cracked devs. I think they're based in Dubai or something, but they've been building this perps trading platform for probably about a year now. And they're super deep in the weeds. They are like true like Solana like hackers. They're writing some Rust smart contracts day in, day out. And we just like vibe with them because we're builders ourselves. We want to support builders who are doing interesting things on Solana, like building this like awesome like perp stacks. And they said they wanted to launch an NFT collection because they wanted to, kind of like how we thought about Tensorians. They wanted to create this tangible community of like power users who were there since day one. And they felt that, okay, NFTs is a way to do it. We saw Backpack do it. We saw Mad Lads do it. We saw Tensorians do it. Let's do the same for our perp stacks. And they came to us and we said, yep, we're happy to support you. You're in this for the long term. You're building a cool product. We want to help you be successful. And so that's our philosophy for a launchpad is we want to help long-term aligned builders who are doing interesting things on Solana versus launching every single collection that comes to us. In fact, we probably say no 9 times out of 10 to all these collections. And it's not because they're like bad or we think they're like ruggers. In fact, most of these projects are genuine people and like well-to-do, like they want to do something cool. But we value sort of like, we value like mind space of like our audience, our traders, our users, and we don't want to bombard them with like 15 different mints every single day. So we've been super selective, and I think we're going to continue that ethos of trying to support people who are doing something cool, who are builders, who are in it for the long term, and then helping them succeed.
Fair. So, okay, so one of my other questions for you is we've kind of seen a maturity of the space as time has gone on. People are a lot more savvy now than they were in 2021, 2022, in the early infancy of all of this. What sort of growth do you want to see from either from a consumer perspective, from a project perspective, and everything like that as we get into this next bull market?
I think, I keep going back to this, I think projects should continue looking into NFT collections and NFTs as a user acquisition tool. I think it is one of the most powerful consumer user acquisition tools that have still been underexplored. And I think it's one way to build a super strong community without like having to do like, you know, some weird things with like a fungible token, or having to do like the points stuff, which has gotten a bit dry over time. I think NFTs are fun and they're very consumer focused. And I think like we're going to see a lot of growth from that, especially on Solana, where it seems like maybe this isn't the case as much on Ethereum, but I haven't been keeping up with a lot of Ethereum projects. But it seems like a lot of the more successful, high profile NFT projects tends to follow this meta right now, or this profile. So I think that's like exciting. I think NFTs, especially with compressed NFTs on Solana, I think we're going to start seeing like some like really interesting consumer facing applications coming out of them. So I guess the most obvious, the example that comes to mind most vividly is what Drip is doing with their drops. They've essentially used compressed NFTs as a vehicle to distribute art to many, many users. And if you think that Web3 is going to grow at the same pace as Web2 did in its early days, you know, this year we might see 100,000 users. Next year, we're probably going to see millions of users, right? And eventually, like maybe 1 billion users. And in order to keep up with this growth, we need stuff that is economically affordable to create. The traditional NFT standard costs you maybe like 30, 40 cents on Solana to do. On Ethereum, might cost you $5, $6 in gas, which is like, that's a non-starter for reaching 1 billion users. But compressed NFTs have basically brought that cost down to pennies of a penny, right? It's 1 million NFTs for $100, and Drip has been able to keep up and use that unit economic to their advantage to distribute millions of NFTs to all of their users. So I think that's a pretty powerful trend that's specifically going to happen on Solana, where I think more interesting consumer apps are going to be built just because the economics make sense now.
Fair. So, okay, last few questions for you. I know you got to get out of here soon, but so what other protocols right now or other projects in the space are you most inspired by?
I would say what Jupiter is doing. You mentioned Jupiter. It's so powerful. Like in terms of their direction, how they see the world, they're essentially going to make the trading experience as seamless as Coinbase, right? But it's entirely decentralized. You don't necessarily need to trust this black box that is Coinbase, where a lot of your funds technically sit behind, you know, layers and layers of software that no one can really audit besides internal auditors and maybe like one of the big 4 firms. But for Jupiter, everything is transparent. It's on the blockchain. It's on Solana. And I think that's how things should be done. And I think the ability for them to execute and build a great trading experience is, you know, unseen in crypto so far, right? They're like when someone from Ethereum comes over to Solana and starts using Jupiter for the first time, their mind is blown, right? It almost feels like you're trading on Coinbase without any of the friction that comes with, you know, using Uniswap and waiting, you know, 20 seconds, 30 seconds for a transaction to go through. So very bullish on them. Of course, I mean, I can't name all of them. Like we're close with like all of these DeFi builders, all of these like Drip I mentioned earlier, Dialect, we're also very close friends with them. They're actually doing something really cool that they'll release, I think, sometime this month. Backpack with their, I don't know what you call it, like a hybrid exchange, where they're one Solana first. So they're not going to like try to like neglect Solana and say like, oh, we have to like build an L2 because there are no existing L1s that are fast enough. That's basically what Coinbase did with Base. They're actually Solana first, and they're building a truly transparent sex-like experience where you have proof of funds. I think that's really cool. And I think that's going to be hopefully the dominant standard for anyone who's trading like tokens on a centralized exchange like product going forward.
Yeah, I mean, completely agree. I think we've got a lot of people who are building some really, really cool stuff in Solana. I think we got a fun 2024 ahead of us, but I want to get into that for Tensor real quick. What can you tell me about any alpha that you want to drop, anything at all? What can we expect in 2024 with Tensor?
The biggest thing is our goal for 2024 is to make Tensor so decentralized that anyone will feel like they're missing out for not building on top of Tensor. I think the way that previous NFT protocols or marketplaces have operated is it's in this like weird gray area where in order to interact with most of these marketplaces, you have to go through an API, and maybe like some of the SDKs work, but for the most part, it's like you have to go through their Web2 API in order to interact and like trade on the marketplace. I think we want to completely flip that model, and we want to make everything as open as possible. And we want to incentivize developers, someone like a Dialect who has like stickers in their current app. They've actually built on top of us to enable trading of their stickers in the app. And we want more of those dApps, those developers, those builders building on top of all of our protocols. Just because we think it makes the most sense. We have battle-tested code that has been in production for 2 years now, and we've gotten it fully audited by a number of auditing firms. And we just don't want people like repeating the same boring work of like writing another NFT marketplace contract. So that's one thing, is decentralizing it, making it so open that any developer who's looking into NFTs will want to build on top of us. The second big thing, the alpha drop for this month, is we're going to be releasing a really cool feature that is an NFT DeFi primitive. Goes back to like how we like saw a bunch of like other protocols, maybe on Ethereum, maybe on Solana, who's doing interesting things with like enabling new ways to trade NFTs. We're gonna be launching a new product that will let you trade NFTs differently, and it's gonna satisfy a need that all NFT traders have felt at some point. The best way to describe it is like insurance, but so much more powerful, so much more capital efficient. Insurance for NFTs, and if you feel FOMO, just basically start using this product, and it's like locking in a price for an NFT.
Oh, that's interesting.
And it's completely different. Like I don't think we've seen a protocol do this before with NFTs, so hopefully it blows people off their feet.
I'm excited. Well, man, that's I mean, if there's anything else you want to drop, this is your time to say it. But man, I've appreciated this conversation. This has been awesome. It's been cool to get to know more about Tensor and everything that you guys are doing behind the scenes. How it was, how you guys kind of view the space and and what you choose to build and all of that. I'm excited, man. You guys got an awesome 2024 ahead of you, and I'm excited to see. I think competition is a beautiful thing. I think it's I think there's room for a lot of different marketplaces to succeed, and I think different marketplaces are focusing on different types of consumers, and I think that's awesome too. But I think the one thing that I always love is I think competition brings out the best, and like that's how we push the space forward, is everybody putting their best foot forward and saying, hey, we're gonna build really, really cool shit that's going to motivate everybody else to build really cool shit, and that's what's going to onboard and get us to go from 100,000 wallets to 1 million wallets to a billion wallets, right? And so I thank you guys for your contribution to the space, because without people like you guys, the space wouldn't be where it's at today. So I appreciate everything you guys are doing, and I know you guys are working your asses off, so I appreciate that, and I appreciate you coming on, man. This has been an awesome conversation.
Yeah, I appreciate it too. I think this has been tremendously fun. I mean, your studio is great. I think you should continue double downing on bringing people in person, and having this very cozy atmosphere. I think it's awesome.
Thanks, man. I appreciate that. Well, hey, drop your socials. Where can people find you?
So my Twitter is, it's hard to describe, but it's it's 0xRWU. It's 5 letters, but there's a 0x like the hexadecimal RWU. I think that's basically it. I guess Twitter is what we use day in, day out. So that's my Twitter. Find me there. DM me if you have questions. if you're a developer, if you're an operations person, if you're a DevRel, shoot me a DM and maybe you can join Team Tensor and help us grow the NFT market on Solana 10x in 2024.
There we go. There we go. Well, hey, I'll drop all those socials in the description below. But man, I appreciate you again coming on, and appreciate everybody tuning in. And we'll chat with you guys soon. See you guys.